Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of GTM Innovators by 360 Insights. I'm your host, Kyle James. And today we're going to dive into, kind of a whole interesting conversation talking about how AI is streamlining competitive intelligence. And to do that, I've got Jon White, who is joining the conversation here with me. Jon is the Senior Vice President of Product at Crayon. Jon, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, super excited to talk to you. And just to kind of start the conversation, you posted something a few weeks ago, gosh, maybe even a month now, about some of the cool stuff that y'all are doing at Crayon, some of the really fascinating new features. And your CEO founder, Jonah Lopen, who was my first boss at HubSpot way back in the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how we kind of connect. Kind of was pretty excited at sharing it. It's like, oh, this looks really interesting how y'all are thinking about it and how you're tying AI into doing something what, always isn't an obvious thing to do, but it takes a lot of work to do research on competitors and stay up to beat and with them. And before we really dive into some of that, I'd just love to hear a little bit of your origin story. I'm a big comic book guy, but you've got an interesting history, like starting at Moz and going to High Spot and Crayon and some other stops in between. So just kind of, tell the audience here a little bit more about you and kind of how that led you into kind of what you guys are doing now, with kind of competitive research.
Yeah, I can give you my superhero origin story. It's not going to be quite as exciting as the comic books, but yeah. So I'm John. I'm in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in the UK. I moved out here about 20 years ago, and I'm currently the head of product for Crayon. I've been working in product management now for about 15 years. I was an engineer before that. I moved into product management because I kind of realized I was more interested in, what we were building for the customer and why we were building it, as opposed to actually building the products. I was the engineer that was always, asked to go along on the sales meeting and talk to the customers, which I really
Yeah, let
enjoyed.
me get on the customer interview so
I,
I can think about why I'm building this instead of how.
right, exactly. So yeah, I found my kind of calling in product management. And I've been working in sort of go-to-market tech, go-to-market PM for about 10 of those 15 years with Moz and with HighSpot for 4 years with a company called Catalyst. And I joined Crayon about a year ago, mostly because I really felt like and we're going to get into this, like the competitive enablement space is just ripe for kind of reinvention for
Mm.
using AI technology. So that was really exciting. I met Jonah. Jonah and I clicked like the first time we talked. We had a lot of the same ideas. Um, and yeah, I've been deep in that world for the last year. It's been really fun.
Nice. So let's talk about that because I kind of teased it and you kind of teased it. So let's jump right into it, right? Like competitive research takes a ton of work because you've got to decide who all your competitors are and then do research into their websites and see what they're doing and see what they're putting out there. And it's manual and takes a ton of time. But what you guys are kind of doing, like it to your point, it's primed for kind of AI disruption. So talk to me kind of how y'all are thinking about that and how y'all are doing it and what you're seeing out there. And yeah, let's just see where it takes us.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to start with like competitive enablement itself. So I think
Okay.
there are some pretty wild statistics out there. So about two-thirds of most companies, about two-thirds of their opportunities of their deals are competitive. Okay. And competitive deals actually close at a way higher rate than non-competitive deals because, if your customer is out there assessing you versus other platforms, obviously they're pretty serious. They're putting effort into trying to buy your product. Um, but if you are, and you should do this, you should go and ask your friends in sales, or you should go and ask anyone who's in like a CRO or a VP of sales role, how well equipped they feel they are or their team is to sell against competitors. And most people will tell you they're not equipped. In fact, there's a
Mhm.
Gartner study where competitive enablement ranked the lowest out of a bunch of different kind of sales practices and disciplines. Sales leaders rated themselves like 2 out of 5 in terms of how prepared they are to sell against their competitors. So then you've got to ask yourself, why is that? Why is this like such an opportunity? It's so important that sales reps are able to, answer objections and land differentiators and essentially win more deals, but most companies just aren't that good at it.
Yeah,
And I think it comes down to what you just said. I think that traditional competitive enablement is very, very manual work. You have to collect all of the data. And by the way, some of our customers have 1,000 data. Our product collects 1,000 data points a day for some of our customers, like literally 1,000 pieces of data a day. Then you have to organize that, you have to synthesize it, you have to find the 5% of that that actually could help someone on your sales team win a deal. Then you have to take that, you actually have to write it down in a way that works for sales reps, like in their language. Then you have to publish it. Then you have to communicate it to the sales team. It's just a lot of work and it requires a very specific skill set. And the result of it is that unless you have product to help you do that, it's very, very difficult to do manually. And that's kind of where we come in. Like we are reinventing that workflow all the way from aggregating the data to organizing it, to publishing it, to enabling your team, to updating the content. We are transforming that using this, new gift of technology that we've been given, which is generative AI.
that's cool. It's fascinating when you think about it, right? Like traditionally, I'm kind of more of a product person myself, but I spent some time in sales funnels and being a sales engineer and whatnot for reps. But really, the only time they get that intelligence historically is when they ran up against that competitor in a sales conversation. And to your point, like it makes sense. Like those competitive ones are the ones that are the most likely to close. It's just, are they going to close with you or them? Right. And so you tease some of that stuff out. But what also is really interesting is we'll just pick on CRMs for a minute because everybody knows what a
Yeah.
CRM is. They all do 95% of the same stuff. Let's be honest. It's that
Yeah.
edge stuff that you have to know what it is and how you differentiate yourself from that other one if you're also selling that. And when you're dealing with potentially dozens or hundreds of those kind of competitors and all these different things, it's the devil in the details, right? And who has time for that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what you find in most companies happens is you've got somebody or you have a team who is responsible for competitive enablement, and that team will, do all the things you're supposed to do, which is, competitive messaging, competitive positioning, customer facing assets, sales training. You have like the official competitive strategy. But then you also have like the unofficial stuff that is what the reps actually do on the calls. And I think in good companies, the official enablement channels are they're speaking the reps language, they're finding talk tracks for reps to use that are landing with customers. But also reps are very resourceful. Like I think you have a number on your head and you have to
Mhm.
hit a certain revenue target every quarter. You're going to do what you need to do to close a deal, regardless of whether, you read it in a battle card or not. So a lot of what we've been working on over the last year is how can we support kind of like the official enablement channels, which is what our product has been doing for a long time anyway. But also, how can we kind of tap into the things that reps are doing organically by analyzing calls, analyzing Slack channels, looking at win-loss interviews, and see if we can combine those together to create more effective enablement.
That's smart. Like, and it feels like all the different people I talk to about AI, right? Like call recordings, transcripts, things like that. That's the low-hanging fruit when it comes to AI. You could just feed it all of this volume of data that it could parse and pick out what are the interesting nuggets here. Everybody knows the call summaries they get now, right? But there's so much
Yeah.
more you can do with that data. And it sounds like y'all are just picking it out for this specific element in such a useful and practical way.
Yeah, I think the call summaries are great. The call summaries are very deal specific. For example, one feature of our product is we integrate with Gong, we integrate with their APIs. Fantastic APIs, by the way. They're a great product to integrate with. But while Gong's call summaries are very useful if you're a sales manager and you're trying to understand what happened on the call, what we're using the AI to do is look across all of your calls, across all
Mhm.
of your accounts. Tell me trends that are happening with competitors. Typically that might show up as our competitor has launched a new feature. This is how it's being positioned. This is how it's showing up as an objection on a sales call to our reps, and then feeding that intel back into the marketing team so they can respond. And again, a rep is not, if you're a rep on a call and you're selling and you get a competitive objection, you're not going to ever say, You know what? That's a really good question. I'm going to wait until somebody on my marketing team answers that for me, and then I'm going to give you my answer. You're just going to like say what you need to say in the moment, and
Gonna
there's some.
wing it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we've also been using those call transcripts to kind of pull out the organic things that reps are coming up with and feeding that back into the marketing team.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine too, like you just got my head spinning here, that having all of those call transcripts, you probably also are able to identify like competitors and competition that people never even thought of before. That probably happens all the time for companies, doesn't it? Or maybe somebody thought of it, but first time they heard it's on a sales rep, and you're
Yeah.
asking the sales rep to put it up the
Yeah,
chain.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that often the first time, I mean, we've all seen it, like in the Slack channel, like someone will say, hey, has anyone ever heard of Acme? You know, X account is evaluating them. Are they competitive to us? 9 times out of 10, that is happening in a customer call. So
100%.
actually one of the features of Crayon is we can identify those competitors when they come up on calls and actually drop them into your insights.
Well, now I'm curious, like wh- how many competitors in normal does an average B2B company, B2B SaaS company have? Like, because there's so many edge cases and people use things so differently, it's
Yeah,
probably
really.
not dozens. It's well, probably not tens. It's probably dozens, right?
It really varies. I think it depends a lot on how many products you sell. I think that we think about it more in terms of how many products or how many go-to-market motions. So you worked at HubSpot.
Yeah.
HubSpot, how many products does HubSpot have today? Probably
Now
20,
it's
20
yeah,
different
it's crazy.
products. So if you went through all of those different products, there's probably like 5 or 6 tier one competitors each. There's probably a bit of overlap. So HubSpot probably has 150 competitors all in all.
Yeah,
Most companies don't have that many products, but I would say on average, most companies probably care about 3 to 5 competitors per kind of product line or per GTM motion,
that's crazy.
about
Yeah.
average. And then obviously, another thing that AI has enabled, which I think is great, by the way, is it's now even cheaper than it was, say, 2 years ago to start a company. So there's tons of these like niche AI companies popping up that just do this like one small thing that might compete with you. And maybe they don't end up growing up into a full business. Maybe they end up, getting acquired or whatever. But what we're seeing is we call them ankle biters. There's lots of like ankle biter type startups that are very early that our customers are seeing. And you care about tracking those too. Maybe it's just like you put that company in the category of like pretty cool technology and they might be important in the future. So I'd say most companies are probably tracking like 5 or 10 of those smaller organizations as well.
Wow. Wow.
There's a lot of companies out there.
Yeah. And they're new popping up all the time, like you said.
Yep.
So, God, there's a couple of different directions we could go. Like, I don't want to go there yet because, right, like where does this go, right? Like I think we kind of get more towards like the where do you see AI coming in the next 6, 12 months? But like what are you doing right now besides, reading some of the stuff, kind of what y'all are doing with creating, streamlining the battle card reports and putting some of that
Yeah.
stuff and putting more content? Like, how do you have success stories or customers are telling you like how they're actually using this stuff in real time that has been just mind blowing?
Yeah, I think so if we think back to the kind of the flow I outlined at the beginning, so you've got to get all the data in one place, you've got to organize it, find the useful stuff, then you have to publish it. That's basically and then you've got to keep it up to date. That's kind of like the flywheel of enablement. Um, we kind of had to ask ourselves like where do we start? Because there's like dozens of opportunities to improve every single part of that flow
Hmm.
using this new technology. And where we decided to start was kind of the data analysis. Okay. And the reason is, some of our customers get 1,000 data points a day. And even if you had a team of 2 or 3 people dedicated to competitive intelligence, which most companies don't, they just don't, that's a lot of data to crunch. So where we started was building product capability that basically allows you to do things like, take all of my G2 crowd reviews, take all of my call recordings, take the deals I've won and lost in the last week, combine all those together, run analysis of them, and tell me what my, strengths and weaknesses are versus this competitor. That's something that, if you did 3 years ago, and I used to I had to do this stuff, I'd be sitting there with like 100 sticky notes all over
Yeah.
my whiteboard, and it's all very manual analysis. And now you can kind of do that stuff in a matter of seconds, which is mind blowing. The reason we started there is because if you can't get that bit right, then you don't know what to write the content about. You don't know what to build the training about. You don't know what to put in the battle card because you haven't crunched the data. So we started there, and this is not, maybe I'm a bit biased, but this is not hyperbole. I would say this has been the most successful feature set I've ever worked on in
Wow.
my career in terms of like, pull from customers, like demand, adoption. We call it Sparks. We've got customers who've, created hundreds and hundreds of these analyses in the short amount of time that we've had it out.
And it's
So
so easy.
yeah, and it's so straightforward to do, and it's a great example of how you can take new technology that's available, and AI really has been a gift to tech companies. It's really allowed us to solve problems that were unsolvable before, and just really help customers.
You said something that is fascinating to me is kind of also a product mind. Like
Yeah.
traditionally we think of this competitive intelligence being used for salespeople. But like, why can't it be used for product people? Why couldn't it be used for customer success people that are like trying to save a churn or something? Like, do you see that happening? Like more and more of these go-to-market, customer facing functions are being able to take advantage of this and using it in new and innovative ways too?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd say the first thing is the line between traditional, like, let's think of your traditional sales rep as like an account executive.
Hmm.
The line between that and other customer facing roles, I think, is like more blurry than ever in a good way. So,
Fair.
like, whereas you could call it sales enablement or revenue enablement. I think, you think of all the different roles now that you're enabling. It's sales, it's customer success, it's account management, it's business development, sales engineering. Basically, anybody who talks to a customer benefits from having competitive enablement because every single one of those people is having conversations about their competitors, right? So I think when we think about sales roles, we're thinking about CS in that same kind of
Right.
bucket. Now, the other side of the coin is, obviously, I am a product person. I care deeply about what my competitors are doing
Sure.
because I want to help my sales people, have a better product to sell. So there's also the strategic side of competitive intelligence. And, you know, many of our customers are feeding data into their product teams, into their marketing teams, into their leadership teams. Turns out, CEOs care a lot about what the competitors are doing as well. Now, I think it's a slightly different type of content. Like you're not, as a product manager, I don't need a battle card.
Right.
I don't know what to say to a customer on a call. What I need to know is X competitor has just launched this feature. This is what my customers are saying about it. So it's a slightly different kind of channel, but equally as important. And maybe in the long term, that's more important because that's helping, me build a better product. It's helping my marketing team build better messaging. It's
Yeah.
helping, Jonah come up with, more effective company strategies.
Yeah, helping you decide what to build because this is
What to
what
build.
people are talking about. What is the pain
Yeah.
that this thing's addressing? Do we have something that addresses that and need to market and position it a new way? But
Yeah.
yeah, it is something for everybody and not like I get why it starts in the sales because everybody thinks of sales money, blah blah blah. But like
Yeah.
it feeds into all these other part of the org too.
And
And if you're
yeah, I think
lowering the barrier to
another
entry to
thing.
get it, like I'm sure there's a lot of demand coming towards it
Yeah, I think as well, one of the reasons it hits sales first is because sales is often the first team that has to deal with it. So
there.
let's think of like a classic example. So maybe when you were at HubSpot, I don't know, say, did you work on the CRM product?
I was there before CRM.
You were there before CRM. Okay, so let's use CRM. So Salesforce announces like they do their like spring release or whatever. What's the first thing that happens when a major competitor announces a bunch of feature stuff? The sales team panics,
Yeah,
right? We've all seen it. So someone puts a blog post in the compete channel in Slack, and then everyone's piling on like, "Oh my God, Salesforce has built this thing, we haven't got this feature, blah blah blah."
yeah,
First thing I think you as a marketer or a competitive intelligence pro needs to do is just like take stock of like what's actually happened. Like, okay, what are the facts here? And I tell you, this is where the call recording is really useful because what your competitor says in their blog post and in their LinkedIn post and on their website about what they've just launched is very, very different to what, your shared prospects are actually saying about it in the wild.
True.
Okay. But the sales team are the first people that have to talk about that because they are the first team in the company that's going to get the question from a buyer along the lines of, oh, hey, did you see Salesforce's new feature announcement today? Like, do you guys have that? Like, what do you think about it? So I think that's another reason why it's really important to prioritize kind of urgency with sales above those other audiences. Like
Yeah.
I make product decisions based on competition, but I mean, you've worked in product too. Like the decisions I'm making today probably don't impact customers for a month or two,
Right.
right? 'Cause you got to
At
build the
least.
thing, you got to, ship it and get adoption. So
Well, so that's interesting. So, right, we talked a lot about call recordings to gather this intelligence, but like competitor press releases, what are all those kind of data inputs that people should be thinking and looking at, like to be gathering this competitive intelligence?
yes, good question. We categorize it into two kind of two different types. So one we call the digital footprint. So that's your kind of classic web data. So the things that, if you're not doing this today, I strongly suggest you buy a product to automate all of this because it will drive you nuts if you try and do it manually. But the things you should be looking at are things like review sites. Look at what your competitors are writing on their website. Obviously, take it with a pinch of salt because not everything that was ever written on a product website is exactly how it looks on the website.
Right.
Look at news, look at, kind of third-party content sites like Reddit, look at press releases, like the kind of stuff that you can find available online. I think a very powerful source of almost like strategic intent today is LinkedIn, because what you'll often see is that a company is entering a new market, your competitor's entering a new market, or they're launching a new feature. Like, look out for what the CEO wrote about it,
Mm,
because the CEO's messaging is going to be like a year ahead of the rest of the company. So LinkedIn is another really good channel. So that's kind of digital footprint, and we support like 80 different data types across that. The other one is what we call buyer, seller, and deal. And this comes from inside your company. Okay, so digital footprint, is on the web. Buyer, seller, deal is inside your company. And this is where you're actually looking at the things that are going on day to day within deals and the sources you should be looking at there. We've mentioned call recordings a lot. If you have a way to look at the emails that are going back and forth between your sales team and your CS team, and your customers. So, for example, Gong supports email
mm,
tracking. We're building that feature too. Slack messages, Microsoft Teams messages. There's a ton of competitive intelligence in your Slack instance. Like not even in the official channels, in like the sales channel or the CS channel. Go and search for a competitor name. You're going to find hundreds and hundreds of hits.
yeah.
CRM, like deal notes, and then another really powerful source of competitive intel is win-loss interviews. I think every company on the planet should be doing some form of win-loss interview, whether you're running that internally or whether you're using a partner for that. If you are looking for a partner, we work with a company called Closed, who I think are really, really good at this stuff. They have these kind of like automated interviews. Like that is a treasure trove. Because turns out when you get a customer who has bought from you or has bought from one of your competitors, and you have somebody that wasn't in the deal, like somebody who's not the sales rep, asking them, why
Yeah.
did you buy from us or why did you buy from them? They will give you nuggets of data that you can use to sell more deals, to tighten up your marketing or to build better products.
And do you recommend, like, I guess both, right? Like I imagine when you win the deal, there's a honeymoon phase. They're all excited to tell you why they won because
Yep.
it's self-validation for them making a good decision.
Yep.
But when they went with somebody else, I guess maybe it's still a honeymoon phase for them choosing something else too, a lot of times. Right. So just piggyback off of it there too. If do you find they
Yeah. Yeah.
share
No, we
equally?
I would say if you have the resource, you should do win-loss interviews when you win a new deal, when you lose a new deal, and then also on renewals. Because like you say, with renewals, the honeymoon phase is over a little bit, so the dust has settled. So if you do a win, so say you won a renewal, if
Hmm.
you have an interview with that buyer, obviously, they still like your product and they're still paying for it because you've won the renewal. But like you said, you're going to get a little bit more blunt feedback because they also kind of know, some downsides or where the skeletons are buried. So
Yeah,
I think it's powerful to do that across both types of deal. But I think the most data you'll get, and sometimes it can be painful, will come from interviewing customers where you've lost the deal
sure.
because you get very blunt feedback about, where your competitor did better than you. And often it's not, this company had this feature and you don't have it. In fact, I'd say like probably less than half the time it's actually about the product. A lot of the time it's about the sales process, whether the sales rep was able to build a good relationship, whether they felt supported, whether they see your brand and your company the same way you do.
I could totally, I mean,
As
we
you're
we
trying.
all know this. You learn more when you fail than when you succeed.
100%.
You just have to
100%.
ask, right? And people don't want to like dwell on that. And it makes total sense if you could outsource that. Like,
Yeah,
find out why we failed to somebody, a third party, to like do those uncomfortable conversations, then great. That's you don't have to
totally.
worry
And
about it.
the third party could be, and I've done a ton, could be someone on your product team, could be someone on your marketing team. The golden rule is don't have the AE that lost the deal go and interview the customer. Because they're just going to come back and say, "Oh, everything was great. They just didn't like this one thing, but they said I was awesome." Like you got to have someone
Yeah,
who wants
yeah.
the deal.
They don't want to beat them twice. They've already beat
Right.
them up
Exactly.
enough at that
I
point.
don't want to lose twice. Yeah.
So you mentioned this in kind of the external stuff, and you mentioned LinkedIn specifically, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what about the rest of social media? Do you look at that for sentiment? Do you look at that more of like counts of mentions, or how do you think about that piece of it too? Because there's a lot of that out there, but maybe it's all just noise.
Yeah, we mostly sell to B2B companies.
Sure,
I think in B2C, if you've got millions and millions of customers, I think that you can get decent sentiment analysis off of social media. Most B2B companies can't because there's just not enough people talking about you. I think where we find for B2B, social outside of LinkedIn, social to be most powerful is like often a company will post a link to, say, an announcement blog post on X or Twitter. So it's not like, you're gonna like read that tweet or that X and like glean a bunch of competitive intel. But if
right.
you follow the link, you're gonna discover something that might help you out.
I see.
I think in B2B, I would say LinkedIn is, everyone's on LinkedIn. I think it's really changed from a social network to a content platform over the last 5 years.
Yeah,
And
it really has.
most something like 80% of companies now uh, make their first like when they're announcing something like announcing a product feature or an acquisition or whatever, the first place they start now is LinkedIn as opposed to, drop it on the PR wire or somewhere else. So I think
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
PR web's almost dead at this point. It feels like no one even pays attention to that. Why are you going to pay
Yeah,
to do it when do it
yeah,
yourself?
exactly. Exactly. Like your audience is on LinkedIn, so like, put it in front of your audience.
So true. So true. So we kind of pushed off on this, and maybe I think it's probably a good time. Like, clearly, the way that we're able to leverage these AI models and things have just like taken down a barrier that was practically impossible or just
Yeah.
too hard, not enough time before. But like, how do you see this changing in the next 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months? And I never ask anybody going further than that because we don't have a
Yeah.
clue further than that at the rate things are going now.
Yeah. I think what we've seen, I mean, I still think we're very, very early in the trend. I actually think the technology is quite mature at this point.
Okay.
Like here's like a data point is, the genesis of the Gen AI kind of movement, or whatever you want to call it, is the kind of the foundational model, like the GPT 3, 3.5, 4.
Yeah.
And the typical use case for that is you type something in and you get an answer back. Now, if you look at OpenAI, let's just take OpenAI as an example. The model itself is not really changing that much anymore. In fact, GPT-5, I can't really tell the difference between GPT-4 and GPT-5, apart from the fact it's like 20 times more expensive.
Yeah.
Like when we went from 3 to 3.5 to 4 to 4 Omni, like there were really meaningful kind of improvements in the underlying technology. If
Yeah.
you look at all the stuff OpenAI is doing now, it's about taking that model and using it in different ways.
Sure.
So you've got your core chat, now you've got your reasoning. Like so what's the GPT reasoning model? O1. O1
Hmm.
is like GPT-4, but with a bunch of like post-training on top of it. Then you've got deep research, which again, it's using the same core technology. So I think what we're seeing now is less innovation in the core models, but more innovation in the applications of it. Okay, that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like these low agentic front ends, or this is where kind of the MCP stuff comes into
Right.
play. Yeah.
Exactly. And then obviously now you've got Operator as well. And I think Operator is using GPT-4 behind the scenes as well. And then you've got, gazillion companies out there who are using the APIs to go and build products as well, like us. I think what's probably going to happen next, and actually I think it's happening already, and you mentioned that we hosted a podcast yesterday with a couple of like industry experts in AI, and they kind of had this take too, is that people are kind of getting overwhelmed because actually now there's like 100 different ways to do the same thing. And if you're a smart product marketer today, you could probably keep a tool set of like 10 or 15 different tools. You could probably do your day job in a half the time, maybe less,
Yeah.
right? If you're really on the leading edge of all this AI technology, there is a ton of stuff out there that's going to help you do your job better. But the thing is, nobody wants to manage 15 different accounts and copy and paste data between different tools and use this for this use case, use that for that use case. So I think what we're going to see is that a lot of these technologies start kind of converging into interfaces. And I think those interfaces will be both within like the foundational models. So the rumor is that OpenAI's next GPT, GPT-6, I think it will be, that's going to have image generation, video generation, agents, reasoning, deep research chat, all in the same model. And you just ask it a question and it figures out which
And
tool you
it
need to use. You don't need to
decides
go
what
to a
around
different
them.
page. And I think we're going to see that in enterprise tools as well. Whereas often, you go to a product like Salesforce, there's AI in 50 different features, but you have to decide like which feature you're going to use. I think what we'll see is that will consolidate as well. So my prediction is over the next 12 months, we're going to see consolidation and simplification of the way we interact with AI. And I think a lot of that will be what, the world is currently calling the agent.
That's cool. So just to kind of fill everybody else, that you just had that conversation yesterday on what was it, future of go-to-market strategy with Clairvaux and Ellen Reshef. Is that with I know Claire from like what she's done with Chat PRD.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
that when that came out a year ago, it's like, oh my God, for product people, it's like, look at this thing.
totally. Yeah,
And
so
then
yeah, we did a podcast with them yesterday. So Claire's on our board of directors at Crayon, which is
okay,
awesome. I get to pick her brain, and she gives me great product advice all the time. Uh,
nice.
but yeah, if you don't know Claire, Claire's like a leading, like probably one of like the top three leading technologists in the world around like AI application. Like some of the stuff she's been building is wild. And then Elon is obviously like co-founder of Gong,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like tech royalty. So yeah, we talked yesterday, honestly, about kind of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today. Where does AI take people's jobs? Like what's the world going to look like in a few years? What are some of the challenges that, AI is bringing to companies? How are companies going to overcome them? It was a really fun session.
Nice, nice. So shout out that everybody would listening to this. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes so
Awesome.
they can
Yeah.
go listen to that too. Um, this is great. John, what have I not asked you? What have we not talked about that you're thinking about that we should kind of wrap up on and like to leave the audience like thinking about stuff? So much more we could cover, but like what are you thinking about now that's got you really like, I don't know.
I think what keeps me up at night in a good way is if I think about the role of one of our customers who is, let's say a product marketer, I am very bullish on this technology being able to automate like a bunch of people's work. I don't think everyone's going to lose their jobs. I'm not like I don't think AI, the robots are going to replace us. I think if anything, it's going to give us the time to do the job that we thought we were hired to do in the first place.
Good unlock.
I think a lot
Yeah,
about like the boundaries of like what are the things that AI can take care of for me, and then what are the things that actually the humans still need to do. Because I actually think there's quite a lot of stuff that, AI is fantastic, but I think there's quite a lot of stuff that actually is not automatable now. And I
it's
think
not
it's
going to come up with original thoughts at all, ever, right?
I think the way I like so I'll give you a tangible example. So well, I won't name names. I'll anonymize the parties involved, but we have a competitor that obviously, we're up in deals against all the time. And, we like to have a set of talk tracks ready for our AEs when this competitor comes up in calls. Okay. And as part of that, we kind of have this narrative that we've created. Then it's a Google Doc and it's a couple of minutes like elevator pitch.
Yeah,
That elevator pitch, 2 minutes long, probably gets used in 90% of deals. That was not written by AI. That was written by a bunch of really smart humans over the course of like a month, like a series of really, intense debate meetings, okay, let's try this. Let's get one of our AEs to go and try that on a couple of calls, listen to the call recording. Okay, this bit worked, this bit didn't. To craft that kind of like almost like underlying strategy was a lot of manual work from, a lot of very intelligent people. And I can't see an AI doing that. Now, what AI can do, AI can brainstorm for you and say, hey, give us some ideas. Like, what are some ways that we could get this point across? What are some ways that we could land this talk track? But the bit where you actually have to do it and test it with customers and debate it and talk to the head of sales, talk to the head of CS, I think there's just a lot of like strategy and collaboration that happens in organizations that, even if you believe in the future where agents are going to be joining our freaking Zoom calls, I think
right.
we are a long way away from AI being able to do that. And I think we've got to be upfront about that with ourselves and also for people like us at Crayon. We've got to be upfront about that with our customers because I think there's a lot of companies out there that are saying AI can do it all. And eventually it's going to be the customers that fail. I think the marketers that are the smartest in this trend just kind of like intuitively know where the boundaries are. They know where they need to go and spend 10 hours obsessing over a problem because only they can do it, where as opposed to, outsourcing it to technology. So I think walking that boundary is a really important point that I think people need to spend more time on.
Yeah, yeah. So just to kind of repeat what I think I heard you say, just to kind of clarify for me and everybody else, it's like the creative aspects and the aspects that actually people enjoy doing are going to be the things that people get to lean in more, and the busy work, we're going to be able to hand that off to AI to be able to handle it. Is that kind of like,
Yeah, I think it's that, and I think it's just be knowing like what you can hand off to AI
yeah.
and what you can't. I'll give you one more example. So we did that webinar yesterday
Hmm.
with Claire and Elon. And within like 2 hours, someone on our product marketing team had turned it into a blog post. And the blog post is awesome. Like you should go and check it out. It's on crayon.co. That blog post was mostly written by taking that call transcript, sticking it into AI. We have a company GPT. And I didn't talk to Shannon how she did it, but I imagine like 90% of that blog post was written by AI and then she finessed it.
Sure.
That's a great example of where AI has just made Shannon 10 times more productive. Okay. But if we told AI, hey, go and write all the questions for the webinar and come up with the answers, etc., like the source content there, it would not have done as good a job.
Yeah,
So you just
you're
got to be
providing it the
deliberate
core
about like
content.
what, yeah, right. You got to be deliberate about what you're handing off and what you're not.
I've noticed that too. Yeah, if you're being very specific and pull from this
Yeah.
and give it some prompts and walk it through some steps of like what it should talk about, what it should write about. Yeah, it's great at that. But you still got to be like pulling some levers of like, don't no, this isn't worth mentioning in that. This is.
100%.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great. John, thank you so much for joining me here today and super insightful. And I think competitive intelligence is one of those things that people don't always think about, but it's such a core aspect of, how to be more competitive and see growth in their job and what
Yeah.
their companies are doing because what is the art of war? Know your enemies better than you do your friends, kind of thing.
Yep, totally.
That's what y'all are enabling, right?
Yeah. And I think like it's often it does get a bit neglected, but if you talk to a sales rep, they're having competitive conversations every single day.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
you know,
That's the
you what
hand-to-hand
you can
combat
do,
right
like
there.
you're gonna help them or are you not? Like if you don't help them, they're just gonna go and make stuff up, and that might be good, it might be not. So I
Right.
think, companies should spend more time talking to their sales teams and understanding how this stuff works in the wild. Because I think when they do that, they'll realize there's real opportunities to win more deals, make more money, which is obviously why we're here.
Absolutely, 100%. So, kind of wrapping up, how can people find you and what can they help you with? Clearly, we've already talked about the webinar a little bit, but what else you got going on? What are your light longs and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best way to connect with me these days is on LinkedIn. I will try and respond to almost every message. Unless you're selling something, I'll still try and respond, but a slightly lower response rate on those. And I just love talking to other people. It doesn't even necessarily have to be product engineers or designers, other people that are doing cool stuff with technology. It doesn't even need to be AI. Like, I love connecting with people who are building things, who've discovered things. I'm in a couple of like round tables with other like product people who are doing the same thing. So, if you've got some cool stuff you're building or you want to hear about some of the stuff we're building, reach out and let's chat.
Love it, love it. Well, this is the intro everybody needs, so reach out and talk to
Yeah.
John.
And obviously,
And
if you think your sales team could be winning more deals, if you think you're losing competitive deals, check out Crayon as well because we can really
do.
help you.
Absolutely. Awesome. So everybody out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, leave it a 5-star review. Nothing lower than 5 stars, obviously. And yeah, appreciate you listening and keep growing, everybody. And we'll talk to you next week with another GTM Innovators. Take care.